everyone, my name is Anna. I am back with another bookish video. In today's video, I will talk about all the books I read in the month of May. The first book I read this month is the Illuminated Files. I was bored with this book 80% of the time. I picked up this book and I actually picked up all three of them. So this is a series with 3 books. I picked up all 3 of the books because it had amazing reviews. Everybody on BookTube, everybody on Goodreads, everybody was giving this like 5 out of 5. Everybody was recommending it, so I was like, okay, let me check it out and see what it's about. I was really into the format of this book. I mean, look at the cover. It's told, let me take this cover off. It looks like this without the sleeve, and it is so cute. The format in which it's told, it's so unique that and you see that? You see, that's supposed to be like a spaceship, a battleship. I don't know what this is. But it's told in the form of files. Let me see if I can get the light to focus. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Let's do a darker page. Okay, here we go. So, I can't get the light to focus on this. But if you look at just the format of it, it's just so different. And it's got pictures and it's just so cool. This book did not get good until page like 350, almost 400. Like literally just the last third of that book was what really caught my interest. So the first book in the Illuminated Files follows the story of Ezra and Katie. They are boyfriend and girlfriend. They're living on the planet of Karenza, I think. And we don't really know that much about the planet because as soon as we get into the tea, it blows up or something like that. Baytech, and look, I'm not about to flip through this book and figure out what the names are. It's Baytech something. They come into Karenza and they pretty much start fucking shit up. They want some of their resources, some sort of resource that's already being mined and kind of like, I don't know, harvested. I don't know what the word is. On the day that all of this goes down, Katie breaks up with Ezra. They manage to escape Karenza and they go on a refugee ship, spaceship. For me, I was like, spaceships? What is going on? They go onto a ship. They seek refuge there. The AI of that ship, his name is Aiden. He is just crazy. He decides that he's going to start killing the people on the ship because he believes that that's what's going to be best for the furtherment of their colony. AI says, look, this is what I got to do, okay? So they decide to shut the AI down, and the AI, has to be rebooted to be able to, I don't know, move the ship or something. In the beginning, the AI is like the bad guy, right? You're kind of like, man, fuck this AI. What does he know? You don't really like Aiden throughout the first part. I would say maybe the first 2/3 of the book. Katie is kind of your main character. You see her perspective a little bit more. You are able to kind of read entries of her diary and you're able to just kind of follow her side of things a little bit more. Ezra is someone who, she very much cares for and is one of the few people that she has left. So they kind of rekindle things a little bit. And it is a love story. And in the end, I really was like, you know what? This was worth it, actually. The story was really pretty. Yeah, once you get through the first 2/3, because sheesh. Illuminae, I half read and I listened to the audiobook because I was just so bored that I was like, look, maybe the audiobook is going to help. So I picked up the audiobook and it helped a lot. I think maybe that's part of why I enjoyed the last third or so of the book so much more, because the audiobook really made it like an experience that I was immersed in. So I would say if you are going to read it, because of the way that it's written and the way that it's laid out and the format of the book, I do think that you need to physically be reading the book. But I will also recommend listening to the audiobook and reading at the same time so that you can kind of get really into it. I gave Illuminae a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. And I think the 4 out of 5 is because the way that the book is constructed, I can't give it anything less than that. I mean, it's just too creative. But the story itself, I was just kind of like, The next book I read in the month of May was actually a book that I don't have the physical copy to at all, but I listened to the audiobook around the house while I'm cleaning, while I'm cooking, while I'm doing laundry, whatever it is that I'm doing. I just pop my little headphones in and I listen.
What was that? I think something just crawled on my floor. You know what? I think it's the bright lights. The bright lights are making me see things.
Yes, Please by Amy Poehler. If you don't know who Amy Poehler is, she was on SNL a couple years ago, and she is Leslie Knope in Parks and Recreation. If you're a Parks fan, you have to read this book. Leslie and Amy are like the same person. Amy is so funny and she's so cute. She's just like this tiny cute little person, and like her humor to me is not like raunchy humor. What makes her funny is almost like her innocence, or how innocent she appears to be in the situations that she puts herself into. It's like awkward comedy almost. So if you are a Parks fan, I would definitely recommend reading it. It has a lot of moments where it's like behind the scenes. She talks about her life, about her come up, what it was like meeting Tina Fey for the first time, and I love Tina. I think Tina's hilarious and I love their friendships. Amy was the one that actually voiced the audiobook for Yes Please, and she has some guests come on and read some chapters, and the last chapter she actually reads in front of a live audience. So that was really cool because I felt like I was in the audience, like listening to the audiobook and listening to her read it and kind of, you know, do little side notes. So that was really cool. I was able to really have a good experience with that book because, you know, you're listening to the author read it how they intended it to come across. So like the moments that were supposed to be sarcastic were sarcastic. The moments that were supposed to be serious, I was able to get the feeling that it was serious. I gave it a 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. I had a good time. Amy is so cute, and she's just so funny, and I really loved being able to learn what it's like to be a comedian and what their grind is like. So that was really cool. The next book that I read in the month of May was also an audiobook, and it was The Girl with the Lower Back Tattoo by Amy Schumer. This one, I believe I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. So I'm not the biggest Amy Schumer fan. I don't really find her particularly like hilarious. I don't dislike her, but I just, you know, I just don't really find her like that funny. So I decided to listen to it because I was already kind of like on this kick of listening to like authors read their own books, and she was another female comedian. It's her story of her come up. It's a little bit of her own agenda. And I say agenda because, you know, it's what she's trying to promote in the world and what she's trying to accomplish. And it was interesting. I think that I have a lot more respect for her now that I know, you know, how hard she worked to get to where she's at. And that's the great thing about being able to listen to memoirs or to read memoirs, is that you kind of grow to have more respect for that person.
Next.
The next book that I read in the month of May was Persepolis. And I did speak a little bit about Persepolis in my book haul because I actually purchased this book in the month of May. And I read it in like 24 hours. It is fantastic. It follows Marjane Satrapi, who's also the author of this book. It follows her life from the time that she is 5 or 6 years old until the time that she is 14. And it kind of just goes through you know, what her life was like before the civil war in Iran, through the changes of government and, you know, who was in power, and what it was like to kind of reach adolescence in a country that was so torn apart. And so I don't want to say too much because I don't want to ruin the story for anybody, and I also don't want to offend anybody, but my perception of what Iran was like and the state of that was just very chaotic and very messy and very violent and misogynistic. It was heartbreaking. I cried, I laughed, because this book was actually really funny. It's a graphic novel if you have not seen it before. It's told in the form of pictures and, you know, just like any other comic book. The writing is very smart. It's funny. It's sad. It's it's very educational. I knew nothing about Iran, so I feel like now I have a really good understanding, or at least a better understanding of what that civil war must have been like for a woman, especially a young woman, to experience. So I will be picking up volume 2 because this is a 2-part story so far. So I will be picking up volume 2. Hopefully this summer I can read that. The next book I read in the month of May was The Sun Is Also a Star, and this is by Nicola Yoon. The Sun Is Also a Star follows the story of Daniel and Natasha, who live in New York City. They are about 17, 18 years old. Daniel is Korean American. His parents immigrated over from Korea. He was born here. He has an older brother. Natasha, her parents are from Jamaica. She was born in Jamaica. They came over when she was 8 years old. I believe she lives in Brooklyn, and she is around the same age, 17, 18 years old. Natasha and her family are about to be deported. Natasha's father is pulled over and he's drunk and he gets a DUI. So this kind of brings attention over to his family. They realize that they are undocumented, and ultimately they, even though they got a lawyer and everything, they weren't able to really fight it. And so they say, hey, you're going to be deported. So that's where Natasha is at the beginning of the day, and this goes down in 24 hours. This entire book goes down in 24 hours. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. Daniel is, kind of the stereotypical, like what we think in America, the stereotypical Asian kid whose parents, are very strict. We want you to go to school, go to college, be a doctor, be a professional. And he's kind of struggling with that because he wants to be a writer. He wants to be a poet. His family doesn't really think of that as a stable career option for him. So they tell him, you know what? Go to this interview. I believe it's for Yale. They tell him, go to this interview. Get yourself together and you're going to school or we're not supporting you. So Daniel gets on the train. He goes on his way. He's about to, do the interview that's going to get him into Yale. It's kind of like in this mindset of like, you know what? I'm just going to live today. I'm going to do what I want. And I'm not going to, hold back. And he sees this beautiful girl. He's like, yes, she's got a cool backpack or a cool jacket or whatever it might have been. He follows her into this record store. And that girl was Natasha. They spend the day together. Natasha's thinking, you know what? This is my last day in New York City. Her home where she has lived her entire life. She has to go back to Jamaica. So she's going into the city thinking that she's going to try and find whatever lawyer was helping them. She's going to try and do whatever she can to save her family. And she bumps into Daniel. He's followed her into the record store. They fall in love. It's kind of like insta love, you know what I'm saying? Like where it's like we just met and we're already like super deep and like there's a connection and whatever. I wasn't really for that. I was just kind of like, that's not realistic. I can definitely understand like having like a connection and kind of like a little bit of a vibe and getting some energy from someone when you first meet them, but I'm not here for we've just met and we're in love and we're gonna give up our entire future for each other. Like that's whack. I believe I gave it a 5 out of 5 because I also thought that it was very educational for me to learn a little bit about like Jamaican culture was interesting, Korean culture as well, and it was light and fluffy. It was an easy read. I listened to it on audiobook and I also read it. Yeah. The next book I read in the month of May was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas.
And it was so good.
I am very outspoken about police brutality and standing up against it and doing what is right, and speaking up for people who are being oppressed, by the police and in communities that go through that. It spoke to me on a very deep level. This follows the story of Star. What's her last name? Star Girl. What is your name? Say the name, say the name. I do not retain things well. Star Carter. Oh, what's right on the cover? I thought Star was an amazing character. It was a multifaceted, strong, intelligent young woman. It follows her as she kind of goes through a trauma, the death of her best friend Khalil, who is shot by a police officer after they are pulled over for, I believe, a broken taillight. That's a story that you hear way too often in the real world. You hear about Black Americans being pulled over, especially Black men, being pulled over for tiny little infractions, and unfortunately it leads to their death. Star is there. She's in the vehicle. She's in the car when her friend is shot multiple times by this police officer, and she witnesses the death of her best friend. And so we kind of follow her journey and how she grows from shook and traumatized and scared to strong, and she's ready to speak about this issue. She's ready to say what happened. She's not afraid to step up against, this entity that is the American police force. She uses the media to her advantage. She's able to start a movement in her community. So friggin' good. On top of that, you're able to see the dynamic of her blended family. You're able to see like her neighborhood and the two rivaling gangs, how that kind of works out and how that affects the community. It's just such a good book. I really can't say enough. You just have to read it. Obviously, I gave it a 5 out of 5. I mean, what else could I give this book? It was just too amazing. It was just too good. Last book I read in the month of May, or I listened to because it was also an audiobook, was Troublemaker, Surviving Hollywood and Scientology by Leah Remini. Leah Remini voices the book herself, which again, I also really like when the authors are able to voice the books themselves because it comes across the way that they intended the writing to. And she just talks about, coming up in Hollywood, what it was like, the grind behind it, and of course her life in Scientology, from the time that she was initiated, baptized, I don't know what they do, to the time that she left and where she's at now, her mental space, emotionally, how she's doing, etc. And it was really great. I was able to really relate to her because I too went to a church very similar to Scientology. That's a later conversation. And her relationship with her father and her relationship with her mother and her sister. I grew up in a similar family setup, similar dynamic where my father wasn't really in my life after about 11, and it was just me, my mom, and my sister. So she went through that, and I was just really able to relate. And I think Leah is so cute, and she's so funny, and she's just cool. So it was a good read. I think I gave this 5 out of 5 stars as well. If you want to check out my Goodreads, I will link that in the description down below. Those are all the books I read in the month of May. What is that, 7, 8? 7? I think 7. Yeah, I think I read 7 books. 7 books for me is pretty average, but not too shabby. If you're interested in all the books that I bought in the month of May, I will leave a link somewhere. And you can see the video that I uploaded last week about all the books that I bought in May. Next video that's gonna be coming up is June TBR, or my June TBR, the books that I want to read for the month of June. This summer, my goal is to also read some classics. I'm gonna try to read some Jane Austen stuff. I've never read any of her work, so I'm gonna give that a shot this summer. It's like the literary classics, like To Kill a Mockingbird and whatever the classics are, I'm gonna read them. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also hit that little bell for notifications so that you don't miss any of my new content coming up. Let me know if you read any of these books, either this month or whenever you read them, what your thoughts are. If you want me to go into like an in-depth review of any of these books, definitely let me know. Alright y'all, bye!
I am so tired of talking. Anyway.